The night Nadia Mensah walked into the Obsidian, Seoul's most exclusive underground members club, buried 3 floors beneath a luxury hotel in Cheongdam, she was not supposed to survive the evening. She did not know this yet. What she knew was the weight of the manila envelope in her clutch bag, the way the bass from the club's sound system moved through the floor like a second heartbeat, and the precise location of every exit in a room she had memorized from architectural plans, obtained through channels she would describe, if pressed, as creative research. She was 30 years old, Ghanaian American, and she had not come to Seoul to dance. She had come to find out who had killed her brother. Kwame Mensah had died 6 weeks ago in a Itaewon alley with a single clean wound that the Seoul Metropolitan Police had filed as gang-related, and then, with the efficient indifference of institutions managing an overloaded system, had quietly deprioritized. Kwame had been 24 years old. He had been a graduate student in international business. He had been, according to the last message he'd sent Nadia 3 days before his death, very close to something that's going to change everything, sis. Something big, don't tell Mom yet. He had not told her what the something was. She had spent 6 weeks finding out. The Obsidian was the answer at the end of the thread she had followed, through Kwame's encrypted files, through his contact list, through 2 meetings with a source who would only speak in public parks and always left before she did. The Obsidian was where Kwame had been the night before he died. And the Obsidian, according to everything she had assembled, was operated under the silent ownership of a man whose name appeared on no public document, but whose presence organized the underworld of northern Seoul the way gravity organized a solar system, invisibly, completely, and without exception. Han Seojin. She ordered water at the bar. The bartender, a young man with careful eyes, did not question it, and found a position where she could see the room without being the first thing the room saw. The Obsidian was immaculate in the way that expensive things curated by dangerous people often were. Low lighting calibrated to make every surface look like a decision, leather banquettes in deep burgundy, a live jazz quartet playing something melancholy and technically extraordinary in the far corner. The crowd was multilingual and multiply powerful, the kind of people who did not need to perform wealth, because they were insulated from the anxieties that made performance necessary. She had been there 11 minutes when she felt the shift. Not a sound, not a movement she could immediately identify, simply the quality of the room's attention changing direction, subtle, collective, like a murmuration adjusting in wind, and she followed it to the source. He entered from a door she hadn't identified as a door, a panel in the far wall that opened and closed without ceremony, and the man who came through it did so with the particular quality of someone for whom arrival was never an event because presence was a constant. Han Seojin was not what she had imagined. She had imagined, building her picture of him from fragments and second-hand accounts, and the particular vocabulary that sources used when they were frightened of the person they were describing. Someone who projected danger the way certain animals projected it, visibly, as a warning. She had not imagined someone who projected it the way a deep current projects it, completely invisible until you were already inside it. He was tall for a Korean man, lean, unhurried, wearing a dark turtleneck and a jacket that had the quiet cost of something bespoke, and the quiet refusal of something that understood it didn't need to announce itself. He moved through the room without stopping, and the room reorganized itself around his path without being directed to. 2 men followed at a distance that communicated deference rather than protection. His face was angular and still, with the specific quality of stillness that came not from absence of feeling, but from absolute management of its expression. He sat at a corner table, said something to the man beside him, did not look at the room. Then he looked at the room, and his eyes found her in approximately 4 seconds, which told her 2 things: that he noticed everything, and that she had been less invisible than she'd calculated. She held the eye contact. She did not look away. She had not come this far to look away from the man who might have ordered her brother's death. He studied her for a moment with an expression she could not read. Then he looked away. 3 minutes later, one of his men appeared at her elbow. "Mr. Han would like to offer you a drink," the man said, in English, which told her that Seo Jin had already established who she was, or enough of who she was to know that English was the appropriate language. "Tell Mr. Han," she said in Korean, "that I don't drink what I haven't ordered myself, but I'll accept a conversation." A pause, then "Follow me." She sat across from Han Seojin, with the length of a small table between them and the envelope in her clutch, and the weight of 6 weeks of grief and research and controlled fury behind her eyes, and she looked at him the way she looked at everything she needed to understand. Completely. He looked back at her with the patience of someone who did not experience silence as pressure. "Nadia Mensa," he said finally. His English was precise and accented in a way that suggested extensive exposure rather than formal learning. "Graduate student, Columbia Business School deferred enrollment, currently based in Accra, arrived in Seoul 14 days ago on a tourist visa. You've been in this neighborhood 6 times in the past week." "You've been watching me," she said. "I watch everything in my territory," he said. "It's not personal, a beat, until it is." "Is it personal now?" He considered the question with genuine seriousness. "Your brother came to me 6 weeks ago," he said. The words landed like a physical impact. She absorbed them, did not let them show on her face, did not let her breathing change. "Go on." He had information regarding a financial operation running through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands with subsidiary connections to 3 Korean conglomerates. He watched her as he spoke, reading her. She understood, the same way she was reading him. The operation was laundering money from a trafficking network, not drugs, people. His voice was even and his expression did not change, and the horror of what he was saying was entirely in the content, not the delivery. He had found the paper trail through his research for a business ethics paper. He didn't know what he had walked into. "He came to you," she said. "Why you?" "Because someone he trusted told him I was the only person in Seoul who both understood what he had found and had reason to want it stopped." He folded his hands on the table, deliberate, unhurried. "The operation was being run by people who exist in my world, who use infrastructure adjacent to mine. It damages what I'm trying to build. And it is," a pause that had weight in it, "something I find unconscionable, regardless of strategic interest." She studied him. "You didn't have him killed." "No." "Then who did?" "The people who found out he had come to me." He held her gaze. "They were watching him before he arrived. They saw the meeting. They moved within 48 hours. His jaw did something, a micro-movement she would learn later, was the external register of internal fury in a man who had trained emotion into almost complete submission. I did not know they had identified him until it was too late. The weight of it, the specific cruelty of 48 hours, too late, settled in her chest where she kept the grief. She breathed through it. "You feel responsible," she said. "Yes." "Are you?" He held her gaze for a long moment. "In the way that a person who opened a door without knowing what was on the other side of it is responsible for what came through, yes, fully." Another pause. "I have been looking for the men who gave the order since the night it happened. I have not found them yet because they are more deeply embedded than I initially understood." His eyes stayed on hers. "I think you may know things I don't. I think that's why you're here." She reached into her clutch and placed the envelope on the table between them. "Quaim sent me an encrypted file 3 days before he died," she said. "I spent 4 weeks breaking the encryption. Inside is the full paper trail he assembled. Shell company registrations, transaction records, the names of the 3 Korean corporate directors who are acting as beneficial owners." She did not push the envelope toward him. She kept her fingers on it. "I'm not giving this to you because I trust you. I'm giving it to you because you are the only person in this city with the capacity to use it in the way it needs to be used." "And what way is that?" Completely, she said, without the limitations of what's legal, which the police and the prosecutors are either unable or unwilling to reach. He looked at the envelope, then at her. What do you want in return? To be in the room, she said, when it ends. He was very still. That's dangerous. My brother is dead, she said. I passed the threshold of avoiding danger 6 weeks ago. He studied her for a long time, longer than he had studied anything in that room, and she understood from the quality of his focus that this was not a small thing. Then he reached out and took the envelope. Stay in Seoul, he said. Don't go back to your hotel tonight. Why? Because if they were watching your brother, they've been watching for anyone who comes looking. His eyes did not leave hers. You've been in this neighborhood 6 times. They know you're here. A cold thread moved through her chest. Where do I go? My building, he said. It was not an invitation freighted with implication. It was logistics, delivered with the matter-of-fact clarity of someone who managed safety as a professional discipline. Murray will take you. You'll have your own floor. No one will reach you there. She looked at him. You're protecting me. For now, he said. Later you can protect yourself, but tonight you don't know the terrain well enough. He stood, signaling the conversation's end with the economy of someone who did not use unnecessary gestures. Tomorrow morning we talk about what's in that envelope, with everything on the table. He moved to leave. She spoke to his back. Han Seo-jin. He stopped, turned fractionally. My brother trusted you, she said. I'm not there yet, but I'm watching. He turned enough for her to see his face. Something moved in it, not quite the architectural suggestion of a smile she would come to know. Something more serious than that. Something that looked like the beginning of respect. Good, he said. Watch carefully. If this story already has you gripped, if Nadia's controlled fury and Seo-jin's quiet devastation have you locked in, then do this right now. Comment the word envelope below. Let me know you are here, you are watching, and you need to know what happens next. And subscribe before the next scene, because what Nadia finds in the morning, what Seo-jin has been hiding since the night Kwame died, and the name at the top of the trafficking network is going to destroy everything you think you understand about this story. I am not joking, don't move. The penthouse floor of the Han building in Yongsan was a study in the particular aesthetic of a powerful man who had excellent taste and no interest in displaying it for anyone else's benefit. Clean lines, dark wood, a wall of windows that looked east over the Han River toward the rising light, a kitchen that was genuinely used, she could tell from the organization of it, not performative. Books in Korean, English, and what looked like Japanese stacked on a low shelf with the disorder of actual reading rather than curation. She did not sleep. She sat at the window with Kwame's file on the table and worked through it again, this time with the Seoul skyline as context rather than the photographs of it she'd studied in Accra. By 5 a.m., she had found something she had not found in the previous 4 weeks of analysis, a connection she had missed because she hadn't known enough about Korean corporate registration to recognize what she was looking at. The third director on the shell company was not a person. It was a holding company, and the holding company was registered to an address in Mapogu that appeared in Seoul commercial records as the registered office of approximately 47 different corporate entities, a standard arrangement for nominee services in Korean corporate law. Except for one entity registered at that address that was not a shell, that had real operations, real revenue, real employees. Han Logistics and Distribution, Limited. She sat with that information for a long time, long enough that the river outside went from black to gray to gold, long enough that she had moved through every emotional response available to her and arrived on the other side of all of them at a place of cold, clarifying analysis. Then she picked up the phone the woman called Murray had left on the table and called the one number programmed into it. He answered on the second ring. "You're awake," he said. "I didn't sleep." She kept her voice level. "I need you to come up here, and I need you to tell me the truth about Han Logistics before I decide whether to walk out of this building." A pause, long enough to be significant. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. He was there in 7. He came through the elevator without the men who usually flanked him. Alone, wearing what looked like the previous day's clothes, which told her he hadn't slept either, the first visible crack in the composure she had been studying since the night before. He stood at the entrance to the main room and looked at her at the table with the file open in front of her, and he did not perform surprise at what she had found. That told her something important. "You knew," she said. "Yes. That your company registration address is shared with the shell entity." "Yes." He moved to the table, pulled out a chair, sat not across from her but at the corner closer to her eye level. "I knew within 48 hours of Quame's death. My own compliance team flagged the address connection during the internal investigation." He held her gaze. "It was not a coincidence. They used the address specifically to point at me if it ever surfaced." "A frame," she said. "Yes, sophisticated enough that it would take someone of your level of analysis to distinguish between coincidence and intent." He looked at the file. "Most investigators would have stopped at the address match and concluded involvement." "Most investigators," she said, "haven't spent 6 weeks learning to read their brother's research methodology." She held his gaze. "He was thorough, Quame. He annotated everything. His notes are in the encrypted file." A breath, the first one in this conversation that was not entirely controlled. "He wrote about you, after the meeting." She looked at the table. "He said, Seo-jin is the most dangerous man I've ever been in a room with, and also the first one in Seoul who seemed angry about the right things." The silence that followed had a different quality from the silences before it. Something had changed in the room's temperature, not warmer exactly, more honest. "He was perceptive," Seo-jin said quietly. "He was 24 years old," she said. "He should have had 40 more years to be perceptive." She closed the file, looked at Seo-jin directly. "The people who framed you, they're the same ones who ordered his death." "Yes. Which means they need you implicated, and they need his investigation buried. Both at once." "Yes. Which means the moment you start moving against them using what's in this envelope, they'll surface the address connection and destroy your credibility before you can finish." She felt the shape of it, the trap inside the trap, the elegant, vicious architecture of an enemy who had planned for multiple contingencies. "They want you to try. They want you to move. Because the moment you do, they trigger the frame and everything stops." He was very still. He was looking at her with the focused intensity of someone watching a lock find its own combination. "Yes," he said, "that's exactly right, which is why I've been unable to move for 6 weeks despite having independent evidence of my own." "Then we don't move from your position," she said. He waited. "We move from mine." She turned the file to face him. "I'm not Han Logistics. I'm not connected to your world on paper. I'm a grieving sister with a documented legitimate reason to investigate her brother's death, with a paper trail of evidence assembled by the victim himself, who happened to be a graduate student with a spotless academic record and an international business ethics focus." She let the architecture of it sit in the air between them. "I file a civil suit. International arbitration. The shell company has Cayman registration, which creates jurisdiction options. I engage a firm in London with no Korean entanglement. The evidence comes from Quame's file, attributed to his research. Your name appears nowhere. He studied her, and when they come after you directly, then your position becomes the response rather than the trigger," she said. "They move against a civilian complainant, a black woman, a grieving sister, filing through international channels, and that is the story that breaks the frame. Because the cover-up always costs more than the original crime if you make them do it in public." The room was very quiet. Han Seo-jin looked at Nadia Mensah across the corner of the table, with the Han River Gold behind her and Quame's file between them, and something moved across his face that had no management in it whatsoever. Something that looked like the specific emotion of a man who has been carrying a very heavy thing alone for a long time and has just encountered someone capable of understanding its weight. "Your brother said you were the smartest person he knew," he said. She felt that land felt it precisely in the place where grief lived. "He was biased," she said. "He was also right." "What do you need from me?" "The name," she said. "The one at the top, the beneficial owner behind the beneficial owners, the one your independent investigation found and couldn't use." She held his gaze. "Give me the name and I'll build the case around it in a way that doesn't touch you." He was quiet for a long moment, the longest she had seen from him. Then, Lim Byung-chul. Third-generation chaebol. His public face is a cultural philanthropy foundation. His private architecture is built on 15 years of trafficking revenue moved through exactly this kind of layered corporate structure. A pause. He has 3 former prosecutors on retainer, a sitting assemblyman in his financial network, and he has been until now completely unreachable. "Everyone is reachable," she said, "from the right direction." What followed was not swift or cinematic in its construction. It was 43 days of work. Nadia established a base in a rented office in Mapogu, deliberately chosen, deliberately unglamorous, the kind of space that communicated academic research rather than legal threat. She brought in a London-based human rights lawyer named Dr. Afia Boateng, Ghanaian, Harvard-trained, with a record in international arbitration that made her precisely the kind of person the opposing legal team would respect and fear in equal measure. She rebuilt Quame's paper trail from its foundations, adding layers of independent verification that transformed his raw research into a document that could survive aggressive legal scrutiny. Seoul did not appear in any of this officially. Unofficially, he was the reason she could walk safely between her office and her apartment at midnight. The reason the man who followed her from the Mapogu building on day 6 of the operation was identified, photographed, and quietly made to understand that continuing his surveillance would cost more than whoever had paid him. She never asked how. She understood that asking was a different kind of transaction than not asking, and she was not ready for it. What she was ready for, what she was more prepared for than anyone who looked at her had anticipated, was the confrontation. It came on day 41. Lim Byung-chul's legal team made contact, not with a threat, with an offer, a meeting proposed through 3 intermediaries at a location of her choice to discuss their language, a mutually beneficial resolution of the matter currently in preparation. She chose the meeting location without consulting Seoul first. She told him after. He stood in her Mapogu office looking at the address she had written down, and was silent for what she had learned to measure as a significant pause. "That's his foundation building," he said. "Yes, you want to meet him on his ground." "I want him comfortable," she said. "Comfortable people make mistakes." She looked at Seoul. "I need you outside, not inside." "Nadia, I need you outside," she said again. "Even clear. This only works if it's me in that room. If you're there, it becomes about you and him. If I'm there alone, it becomes about Quame, about evidence. About the international arbitration filing that is 3 signatures away from submission." She held his gaze. "He'll try to buy me. I need him to try. I need it on recording." He looked at her for a long moment with that expression, the one without management, and she understood that what she was watching in him was a man who protected as his primary language, encountering the specific difficulty of protecting someone who did not require protection in the way he understood it, who required instead to be trusted. "If anything changes," he began. "Have your number," she said. "I know the room, I know the exits." She paused. "Seoul, trust me the way I trusted you on day 1. He was quiet. Then he nodded. Once. The particular nod of a man making a decision that costs him something. Lim Byung-chul was 61 years old and looked like money so old it had stopped remembering its own origins. He received her in a conference room on the 14th floor of his foundation building, glass walls, Han River view, the kind of room designed to communicate that everything outside belonged in some organizing sense to the person sitting inside it. He had 2 lawyers flanking him. She sat alone. "MS. Mensa," he said in English. Smooth. Practiced. the performance of a man who had managed his image for 40 years and found it effortless by now. I appreciate your willingness to meet. I understand this has been an emotional time. The loss of your brother, the murder of my brother, she said, pleasantly, factually, a small pause. The circumstances were tragic. The circumstances were Idiwan Alley single puncture wound, professional execution consistent with contracted killing. She placed her hands flat on the table. I'm not here to negotiate terminology. I'm here because you requested this meeting, and I'd like to understand what you're offering before I submit the arbitration filing at 9 a.m. tomorrow. His composure held. She gave him that he was skilled. We believe there may be inaccuracies in the documentation you've assembled. Our legal team would like the opportunity to review. The documentation was assembled by my brother over 8 months using publicly available corporate records, financial disclosures, and 3 independent forensic accounting analyses. She tilted her head. What specific inaccuracy concerns you? The attribution of the holding company is supported by beneficial ownership registrations obtained through international disclosure requests under the UK's Economic Crime Act, the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority's Transparency Framework, and 3 bilateral agreements between South Korea and international financial regulators. She reached into her folder and placed a single document on the table, a summary sheet, clinical and thorough. The attribution is airtight. Room had shifted. She felt it. His lawyers were exchanging a look she recognized, the look of people recalibrating how much trouble they were in. MS. Mensa, Lim Byung-chul said. His voice had changed slightly, still smooth, but with something beneath it now, the first note of a different kind of register. There may be ways to address your concerns that don't require formal proceedings. The Foundation supports various human rights initiatives across Africa. I understand your family. Stop, she said. He stopped. You were about to offer me money, she said, or a foundation grant, or a scholarship in my brother's name. She held his gaze across the table. I want you to understand something clearly. My brother died because he found this paper trail. If I accept anything from you, the paper trail dies with him. If I walk out of this building and submit the filing tomorrow, the paper trail survives. She stood. My brother was 24 years old. He believed that evidence and truth and the right institutions could dismantle structures like yours. He was wrong about the institutions. She picked up her folder. He was right about the evidence. She walked to the door. If you file, Lim Byung-chul said behind her, there will be consequences. She turned, looked at him with the specific expression of a woman who has already calculated every consequence and priced them against the alternative. There already were, she said. I'm just changing who pays them. She left. In the elevator, she sent one text. Done. Filing tomorrow. Are you outside? The response came in 4 seconds. I've been outside since you went in. She looked at the screen for a moment. Then she typed, let's go home. There was a pause. Then, which home? She thought about it. Thought about the penthouse floor with the Han River view, and the books that were actually read and the kitchen that was actually used. Thought about 43 days of building something in the Mapogu office and 43 evenings of debriefing across a table with a man who listened with his entire attention and never once tried to redirect her towards safety when what she needed was forward. She typed, yours. I'll make tea. You tell me what you were actually feeling every time I walked into a dangerous room. This time the pause was longer. Then, that's a long conversation, she smiled. Breathed. Felt, for the first time in 6 weeks, something that was not grief or fury or calculated strategy. Something smaller and more honest than all of them. I have time, she typed. The arbitration filing was submitted at 9 a.m. the following morning. By noon, the first financial journalism outlet had received an anonymously sourced document package, Quame's Research, professionally formatted, with a media summary that Dr. Afia Boteng had written in language precise enough to be legally defensible and clear enough to be understood by anyone. By 3 p.m., 2 Korean financial news outlets had picked up the Cayman connection to Lim Byung-chul's foundation. By 6 p.m., the story had reached an international wire service. Lim Byung-chul's legal team filed emergency injunctions. The injunctions failed. The documentation was sourced across 3 international jurisdictions, and the Korean courts had no authority over the arbitration proceeding or the international media distribution. At 8 p.m., the assemblyman connected to Lim's financial network issued a statement claiming no knowledge of the shell company structure. By the following morning, the statement had been contradicted by a financial disclosure that surfaced through channels that no one publicly attributed to Han Seo-jin, and that everyone in certain circles understood immediately. Lim Byung-chul did not fight gracefully. He fought the way cornered men with unlimited resources fought, with pressure on every surrounding structure, with legal maneuvering, with the deployment of the 3 former prosecutors in configurations designed to slow and complicate and obscure. He fought for 4 months. He lost. The trafficking network was dismantled across 3 Asian and 2 West African operational nodes over a 14-month period, through a coordinated effort between the International Arbitration Proceeding, 2 national financial crime units, and an investigative journalism consortium that had received the documentation package and spent 11 months verifying and expanding it. Kwame Mensah was credited, in the final published investigation, as the originating researcher. His photograph, young, laughing, taken at his Columbia orientation 3 years before he died, ran beside every major article about the case. His name was in the record. That had been the one thing Nadia had required of everything, the single non-negotiable beneath all the strategy and the architecture of ruin. That her brother's name was in the record, that the work he had done at 24 years old in a city that then killed him for it would be documented and attributed and permanent. It was what Han Seo-jin became. In the 2 years that followed was a question that the Korean underworld debated in the careful, indirect way that world debated everything, in euphemism and implication, and the language of what was not said. What was clear was that the Han Logistics Network's transition toward legitimate operations, which had been stalled for 3 years by the pressure Lim Byung-chul had been applying, accelerated after Lim's collapse with the efficiency of something that had been held under pressure and suddenly released. Within 18 months, Han Logistics was the leading legitimate freight partner for 4 West African market entry operations, all of which had, as their cultural intelligence consultant on contract, Nadia Mensah, now formally enrolled in the Seoul campus of a joint MBA program she had deferred twice. The Korean underworld debated his transition the way it debated everything. Some said he had gone soft. Some said he had gone strategic. The people who knew him best, and there were very few, understood that neither of these was accurate. He had not gone soft. He had gone somewhere more precise than soft or hard. He had become someone who built things instead of defending them. The distinction, he had explained once to Nadia over cold tea in the Mapogu office, was the entire difference between power that required constant maintenance and power that compounded. She had written that down. She had used it in 3 negotiations since the night that was the ending of one thing and the beginning of another was not a dramatic evening. It was a Tuesday in November, which was exactly the kind of weather Seoul used to test whether you decided to stay, cold, gray, specific, unromantic. They were in his kitchen. She was at the counter with the Korean-language newspaper she was working through as a reading practice. Her Korean was now excellent. Her reading lagged slightly behind her speech, and he was making doenjang jjigae because it was the soup his grandmother had made when he was young, and he made it when he needed the particular comfort of a thing that predated everything he had become. The apartment smelled like fermented soybean paste and scallion, and the particular warmth of a small kitchen doing what kitchens were designed to do. She looked up from the newspaper. "The article about the arbitration ruling," she said. "It describes me as the American complainant." "Ghanaian American," he said, without turning from the stove. "I know they didn't ask." She set the paper down. Kwame would have found that irritating. Tell me something he would have found funny instead. She thought about it. He would have found it very funny that the most feared man in northern Seoul makes his grandmother's soup when he's stressed. He turned, looked at her with that expression, the one she had been cataloging since the night at the Obsidian, the one that had started as an architectural suggestion and had become, over 2 years, a real and unguarded thing. I'm not stressed. Then why the soup? He held her gaze for a moment. Because you're here, he said, and some things should be marked. She looked at him across the small kitchen, this man who had been built by danger and had chosen, deliberately and at significant cost, to build something different. Who had protected her not by keeping her from the room but by trusting her to be in it. Who had let her take the architecture of ruin apart in her own way and had understood, without being told, that this was the only way it could have worked. Who had loved her, she understood, not from any declaration. They were not people who arrived at declarations before the reality they described was already complete. In the particular way of someone who recognizes something they had given up expecting to find and responds to it by becoming, quietly and irreversibly, different. Mark it then, she said. He crossed the kitchen and stood beside her at the counter, close enough that his arm was against hers, the same language she had been learning to read. I'm here. I choose this. Not as arrangement or strategy or calculation. Just this. Outside, Seoul did what Seoul did on November Tuesdays. It moved. 12 million lives. All those stories, none of them simple, all of them running at the same time beneath the same gray sky. Inside, there was a woman who had come to a city to find out who killed her brother, and had found, in the ruins of that investigation, something she had not planned for and would not trade. Inside, there was a man who had spent 15 years building walls and had discovered, gradually and then completely, what it felt like to build something that needed no walls because it was built on ground solid enough to stand on its own. Kwame Mensa's name was in the record. The door was open. And in a kitchen in Yongsan, while the soup did what good soup does, the patient, unhurried work of becoming something nourishing, two people who had come to each other through grief and strategy and 43 days of careful trust were, for the first time in a long time, simply home. That was the empire she had taken, not the one anyone had expected, the only kind that lasts. You stayed until the end, and you felt every single word of it. I know you did. Here is what I am asking you to do right now, before you click away, before you scroll past, before you tell yourself you'll do it later. Hit the like button. If Nadia Mensa, her grief, her strategy, her controlled fury, her refusal to be rescued when she could be trusted moved something in you, then this is how you tell me. One tap. Right now, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because Nadia and Seojin's story has a part 2, and it begins in Accra with her mother, with a threat that followed them from Seoul, and with Seojin doing the one thing no one in his world believed he was capable of, asking for help. That episode drops exclusively for subscribers. Share this video with someone who has ever been underestimated, who has ever walked into a room and been told by someone's eyes, someone's silence, someone's casual cruelty, that they did not belong. Send it to that person. They need Nadia Mensa today. Comment your answer. What was the moment Nadia stopped being a visitor in this story and became its architect? Was it the envelope, the morning reveal, the conference room, or was it the text, "Let's go home," that broke you open? Tell me. I read every comment, every single one. This community is built one comment at a time. This story was crafted exclusively for this channel. All characters are fictional. Kwame Mensa's name is in the record. That part is real.